Hi everyone, in today's tutorial we will talk about FastAPI in Python. This tutorial is designed for developers who want to learn how to build REST APIs using Python. API are the backbone of modern architecture because they allow for application to be modular and decoupled. This means that you can build and maintain applications quickly and easily. API are also very important in machine learning because they allow different applications to share data and work together. There are many different frameworks for building APIs in Python. Some of the most popular frameworks for creating APIs in Python are Django, Flask, and FastAPI. This tutorial is a deep dive into the one of the framework called FastAPI. An API is a software intermediary that allows two applications to talk to each other. When you use an application on your phone, the application connects to the internet and sends data to a server. The server then processes the data and sends it back to your phone. FastAPI is a high-performing web framework for building APIs with Python 3.7 plus. It is based on standard Python type hints. FastAPI is built on top of the Starlet web server and includes features that make building web application easier, such as automatic data validation, error handling, and interactive APIs docs. To successfully create this tutorial in PyCharm editor, you first need to set up your Python development environment. We have a PyCharm editor open on our machine. We are going to create on a new project. Here we will name it Demo Fast API. We will select interpreter from this list. Currently, we are having 3.13 Python interpreter on our machine. VNV we have just selected by default. You have to just click on create. Now we have a virtual environment for this project Demo Fast API. If you see how many packages are installed on this environment, you can just type in pip list command. It will show you which packages are installed in this environment. You can see we have only pip installed on this environment. We will install FastAPI and uvicorn packages on this environment. We have to just type in command pip install FastAPI space uvicorn. Uvicorn is a tool to work as the server. All dependencies are getting installed in this environment for these two packages, right? Packages are installed if you type in the command pip list again, so you will be able to see multiple packages now in this environment. You see, we have pydantic, we have FastAPI, and then uvicorn. Now let's create a new Python file in this project. Right click on the project, select new and Python file. We will name it main.py. Let's write some code. We will import FastAPI, import FastAPI. Right? We will create a new app instance of FastAPI. We will use this app and use one get function. This is the base path for our API. Okay? Then we will define a new function. It is a test function which will return simple message. Hello API. So our first API on this local environment is ready to test. In order to run this API, we have to type in one command on our terminal, that is uvicorn, and we have to just say reload parameter. So you will see a new host is now ready for us to test this API, right? This is the localhost URL and this is the port on which this API will be running on our local environment. When you click on this link, so you will be able to see this simple message that we have set on this base URL. Hello API. If you notice this message, this is a JSON object. So that JSON message is the same dictionary that return from the function in your application. Okay. So FastAPI takes care of serializing the Python dictionary into JSON object and setting the appropriate content type. There is one more way to run FastAPI. We have to just stop the server by pressing Ctrl C. The server is stopped now. Your API will not work anymore, right? I have one code snippet which will check the name attribute. So we have provided three arguments here to set up uvicorn server. First is the app, that is a first API instance. Second, we have set a local host and then we are running this API on this port. Now if you type on command on your console main.py, that will run the uvicorn server. You see, now uvicorn server is running for us. This is the URL that we are running previously. This is the request that we have just made on this browser and that returns as 200 code. So when you run Python script, the interpreter assigns the value main to the name. Okay, if Python imports the code as a module, then it sets name to the module's name instead. Congratulations, your first API is up and running. FastAPI uses Swagger UI to produce automatic interactive documentation. Let me open the browser again, docs with your default URL, then you will be able to see a nice Swagger API documentation. There is only a single endpoint we have just created. Click on it, you will be able to see a one button over here. Try it out. When you click on this button and you click on execute, you will be able to get a response body. That is a JSON object. There is one more alternative API documentation that comes with redoc endpoint. Okay, here you will be able to see the same endpoints on this FastAPI code. So as FastAPI is based on standard like OpenAPI, there are many alternative ways to show the API documentation. So FastAPI provides these two alternatives by default. While building an API, the path defines the route or endpoint of the request. However, there is one more choice we have to make here, that operation. Let's perform operation with HTTP methods. Now that you have the FastAPI app working, we can define our grocery list item. Let's create a new Python file. New Python file. We will name it models.py. I have some code handy to save some time. This is a typing module. There is a pydantic module as well. We are using base model, which means we are going to define a model for our grocery list item. A specific grocery list item has three attributes: item ID, item name, and quantity. Here, with help of typing module, we have item ID as optional for this item payload. Now we need a place to store the grocery list items. For simplicity, let's start with an empty dictionary. Let's open our main Python file and we have to import few more classes with FastAPI. I'm going to use HTTP exceptions and then we'll import our model class. Okay, that is what we have just created for our payload. And we are also going to create a one list that will work for our grocery. Here we are going to take a dictionary type which will hold an integer to index the particular grocery item and return type would be item payload. Okay, we will now define routes in our FastAPI application. In the context of a web application, routes are like pathways that map a specific URL to the code that handles them. These routes serve as entry points for the different functionality within our application. When a client, such as a web browser or another program, sends a request to our application with a particular URL, the FastAPI routes that request to the appropriate function. Okay, this way. And that function process the request and generate a response. So let's proceed with defining routes to add and retrieve individual item as well as return all items in the grocery list. Okay, so what I am going to do, I am going to create a new function, new, or you can say a new endpoint that will add a new item to this local grocery list. Point to be noted here, this list is a memory object for us. Once your APIs is stopped, your all data will be cleared out from this list. I'm going to use the post function. We'll say items. We will take item name and quantity from the URL. Okay, quantity. So these are the placeholder. Inside we are going to take name and the quantity from the URL. Then we will create a function. I'm saying add item. Item name as a string. Quantity we will have as integer. We are first going to check if quantity is not less than equals to 0. If it is less than equals to 0, then we are going to raise one exception, that is HTTP exception. Status code we will set as 400. Details we will set quantity must be greater than 0. Okay. If quantity is greater than 0, then we are going to create a new item ID for our grocery model. Okay. Items ID is none 0. We're checking for item in grocery list dot values. Values means all the models as a value. Then we will check one more thing. If item name in item IDs dot keys, then we will say item ID equals to item IDs as item name, because name is a key for us for particular grocery item. Okay, we'll just update the quantity. Okay, quantity from the request. All right, else what would happen if the item name from this request is not present in this object, then we are going to create a new ID for the item. Okay, we'll say item ID equals to grocery list dot keys, because for keys we have all item IDs. We are going to take max of this key. We are going to take max of this key, and then we are increasing a one value. If grocery list else 0. Okay. Here we are saying if there is any item in the grocery list, then we are going to get the max value from all the keys. Means ID 0, 1, 2 and 3 for all items. So we are generating a new ID here. Otherwise, we are going to return a 0 item ID in this variable. And then next step, we have to just create a new grocery item. Item ID, we are going to set item payload. Inside item payload, we have to define our value from the request. Item ID that we have just created. Item ID. Item name that we are going to receive from the request item name. This name. Okay. And quantity that is the same from the request. So in this line, we have just created a new item in this grocery list object. Okay. We will just return item that we have just received. Item, then grocery list, and we will be pointing to our item. Okay. This item. Okay. So let's stop our server again and run the program. I press Ctrl C and fire the same command to run the API. It will again start up the web server and we will see a new endpoint on our API. You see, we have post new endpoints with our fast API. Here we are going to post our new model. Click on try it out. Item we will say apple, quantity is 10. When we click on execute, you will get a new item as a response body. We have two endpoints now. The post, which is adding new item to our grocery list object. Another is get. That get endpoint we are going to modify a bit. Okay, instead of test, we will say list items. Okay, here we will say items. In the return statement, so this will return all the grocery list from this object. It is very simple. Stop the server, run the program again. You will refresh your API. If you click on tryout, so it will return us blank object because we have not added any of the grocery item in this local object. Okay, let me add new item here. Okay, I'm saying apples. Click on execute. A new model is being added to the local in memory object. Alright, that item ID is 0, item name is apple, quantity is 30. Okay, this is a list of object. If you try to execute get all items and point, then you will be able to see this new object we have just created. So as a key in the dictionary, that is 0 and the value is payload model. If you add one more items, oranges, quantity is 20, you click on execute. So new item has been added to this local object. If you click on this items endpoint again, so you will be able to see now two objects 0 and 1. One is for apple, second is for oranges. Alright, so our two endpoints are working now. One for getting all the items, second for adding new grocery item into this object. Alright, sometimes we need to point our specific item. In order to get a specific item, we need to create one more endpoint. It will return you the specific item from this local object. Item ID we will be passing with the request, right? And then we are going to return the specific items from this local object. If item ID is not in the grocery list, then we are going to get a exception that item not found. It will see, run the command again, refresh our API. Now a new endpoint is being added to our API. You see, item ID. Since we have just restarted the application, we need to post some data. Let me check first whether we have any item or not. There will not be any item. It's a blank object. Okay. So we will add new item. Apples 50. Click on execute. Now new item is being added here. Okay. Let's check out all items again. Here we have data. Now you could see the item ID is 0 for this apple grocery item. Let me check new endpoints we have just created, that is the item/item ID. We are going to provide item ID that is not exist in the local object. So it will return you item not found because 25 ID is not being added to that local object. If you click on execute, you will be able to see the particular item, right? Apples 50. Now let's check operation for updating an item. Okay, you have seen that we have just added apples with 50 quantity. Suppose you are going to update quantity for this particular grocery item. So what would happen? So it will first check whether the apples is already there in the local object or not. If it is exist, then it is going to update its quantity, right? Let me show you first that what we have with this local object. There is apples with 50 quantity. What I'm going to do, I'm going to update its quantity with the same endpoint, that is post. Okay, let me just say we have more quantity with apples. We have 20 more quantities. If you click on execute, that it becomes 70. You see, if you execute all the items and point, then you will see we have apples quantities as 70, because we have written the code in such a way that can handle the existing item scenario. Here we are checking if we found the item name in our keys, that it is going to update the quantity. You see this operator. This quantity we will receive from the request. Okay. If the item is not present in the key, then we are going to create a new item, and then we are going to create a new item payload model. Okay. In the same object, in this object. Now let's see how to delete a specific list item. I have some code handy to save some time. You could see we have a new endpoint with new HTTP method, that is delete. We are going to accept item ID as a query string, which will actually delete the particular item from this list. We are using del keyword to delete this particular item. Okay, and it will return that item deleted. If the item is not present in the grocery list object, then we are going to get that item not found. If you rerun your API again, let me refresh the API. Okay, there would be nothing. We have one more delete endpoints with our FastAPI. Okay, let me add some data first. Apples 10, oranges 20, get all. You will get two items. Let's check the delete case. We have item 0 and 1. I'm going to delete any item which is not present in this object. Let me take 30 as the item ID. It will return that item not found. Let's delete the item with 1 item ID. I'm just taking 1. Click on execute. So your item is deleted now. If you get all the items again, then you will see only item with 0. Orange's item is now deleted from this local object. You see, I have created even more endpoints which will actually decrease the item quantity. Right? This is a new endpoint that will take item ID and quantity. It is first checking whether item ID is in grocery list or not. If it is not, then it is going to raise an exception. If it is less than quantity, then we are going to delete the item. If it is not, then we are going to decrease the quantity. That is very simple code. If you rerun your API again, then we can check this new endpoint as well. Okay, refresh the API. There would be nothing. There's no item. We have to add. I'm adding apples again with 50 quantity. Click on execute for all the items. Yes, we have one item now. So here the case is we are going to decrease our quantity for an apple, right? New endpoint for removing quantity. Let me try apples. I'm going to decrease the quantity with 5. Click on execute. Oops. Item ID would be 0 and quantity we are going to decrease with 5. You see 5 items removed. If you get all the items again, then your quantity will be updated. You see, initially we added apples with 50 quantities. Now after removing 5 quantity, we are getting 45. We have performed CRUD operation on our fast API. You see, that brings us to the end of the today's video. We hope you found it informative and engaging. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting content on all things tech related. Thanks for watching and we will see you in the next video.